I never thought I'd fall in love this way. Not at my age. Not after everything. What began as the slow collapse of a marriage ended in something I could never have imagined. Something raw, forbidden, and painfully real. I didn't just betray my wife. I crossed a line no one dares to name. But love doesn't follow rules. And neither did he. This is a story of secrets and second chances, of the kind of love you bury deep until it burns its way out. I remember the silence most of all. The silence between two people who've shared a bed for 20 years, but haven't touched each other in 5. Clara sat across the dinner table, scrolling through her phone as if I weren't there. The roast chicken between us was perfectly seasoned, perfectly moist, and perfectly cold by the time either of us picked up our forks. We used to talk. We used to fight. Somewhere along the way, silence became safer. I was 46, an architect, a father, a husband, a ghost. Clara, I said, just to prove my voice still worked. She didn't look up. Have you talked to Leo lately? Her shoulders stiffened. He texted last week. He's fine, that was all. He's fine, but I knew better. I hadn't heard from our son in 6 months, not since his birthday. Not since that blurred Instagram story of him dancing in a dark club, his smile the only thing in focus. Leo had always been different. Quiet, artistic, sensitive. He loved painting more than sports, something Clara could never quite forgive. When he came out at 17, I told him I loved him no matter what. Clara said the right words, but her tone left frost on the air. I didn't blame Leo for drifting away. I blamed myself for letting him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my office staring at the model of a boutique hotel I was designing, wondering when my life had become so hollow. My hand wandered. Facebook, Instagram, email, the quiet ritual of distraction. And then I saw it. Hey, can we talk? Sent at 10:03 a.m. from Leo. My heart stuttered. Dad, I know things haven't been easy between us. I don't even know if I have the right to ask you for anything, but I need to see you. Not Mom, just you. Can we meet tomorrow? He'd left a cafe address. I replied instantly, I'll be there. The next day, I arrived 10 minutes early. My palms were sweating despite the cool breeze. The cafe was small, tucked between a dusty bookstore and an old tailor's shop. The kind of place that smelled like stories, mismatched mugs, soft jazz, quiet conversation. Then I saw him. Leo had grown up. Broader shoulders, sharper jawline, more confidence in the way he carried himself. His hair was shorter now, his style more refined. Black turtleneck, silver rings, still that familiar spark in his eyes. Hey, he said, voice low but warm. Hey, I replied, suddenly feeling a lump in my throat. We hugged, a little awkward, a little stiff but real. Then we sat. Coffee, small talk, weather, work, his freelance graphic design jobs. For a while it almost felt normal. Then he exhaled. I'm moving, he said. I blinked. What? Where? Berlin, in 2 weeks. I got a chance to work with a design studio there. I froze for a moment, trying to absorb it. My son leaving again. He hesitated before speaking again. Dad, there's something I need to say before I go. His tone softened. It's about me, and about us. I nodded slowly. Go ahead. He looked down, then back up at me. I just want you to know that even when things were rough, you were the one who made me feel understood. You didn't judge me when I didn't fit the mold. You listened. You saw me. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to speak, but all that came out was a whisper. I'm sorry I wasn't there more. Leo smiled faintly. You were there in your own way, Dad, and that mattered. Silence. The kind that doesn't hurt anymore, the kind that heals. I looked at my son, this man he'd become, and realized that even after all the mistakes, we still had time. Time to try again, but another part of me, one I'd buried for years, trembled at the raw honesty in his voice. I stood up too quickly, knocking over my coffee. I need some air, I stammered. He didn't stop me. He just nodded, his eyes full of something I couldn't name. That night, I drove for hours through the hills, past the quiet edge of the city. My thoughts circled endlessly about Clara, our cold bed, and Leo, my son, the little boy who used to curl up beside me when storms scared him. I couldn't explain what I was feeling. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something deeper, a kind of ache that comes when you realize how much time you've lost. By sunrise, parked beneath an old oak tree, I understood one thing. I had to see him again. Not to fix the past, but to understand it. To finally listen. We met at a park he'd loved as a child, the one with the crooked fountain and faded benches. He was already there, sketchbook in hand, headphones around his neck. "You came back," he said softly. I sat beside him, careful to leave a bit of space between us. "You dropped a lot on me," I said. "I just needed time to think," he nodded slowly. "I've carried so much of this alone," he whispered, eyes fixed on the page. I never felt safe sharing my thoughts. "But you always listened. You never made me feel small." I closed my eyes, hearing the weight in his voice. I remembered the nights he cried as a kid, how I'd try to make him believe the world wasn't as cruel as it seemed. Maybe I hadn't been perfect, but I'd always tried to be his safe place. Love, real love, isn't about control or perfection. It's about showing up. We spent that afternoon walking, talking, laughing a little, carefully, honestly. He told me about how hard it had been to find people who truly valued him. Not for what he looked like or what he did, but for who he really was, and I knew then that my role wasn't to fix him. It was simply to be there. To remind him that he was seen and that he mattered. "You always made me feel safe," he said quietly. "I knew you'd understand someday." By dusk, we were sitting on the hood of my car, watching the sky turn pink, then purple. The air felt peaceful, like we'd finally stopped running from something. Then he asked, "Dad, if things had been different, do you think you would have trusted me sooner?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him. My son, not the boy I used to protect, but the man he'd become. "I think maybe I already do," I said finally. He smiled, and for the first time in years it reached his eyes. That night, when I went home, Clara was asleep on the couch, the TV murmuring softly. Her phone glowed faintly in her hand, forgotten. I looked at her, at the quiet room around us, and realized something simple yet powerful. Healing doesn't always happen loudly. Sometimes it starts in silence. I stared at her, wondering when we'd stopped being partners and started living like strangers under the same roof. The silence between us had become its own language, heavy, tired, familiar. That night, I moved through the house like a ghost. Into our bedroom. Into the shower. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself cry. The emotions I felt for my son were real, powerful, but complicated. There was love, guilt, fear, and the ache of a connection I'd almost lost. And everything I shared with Clara suddenly felt hollow, like a photograph that had faded with time. Over the next few days, I tried to pretend life was normal. I went to work, had coffee with colleagues, sent my son small messages, simple, cautious things. "Hope you're eating. Loved your new sketch. Thinking of you." His replies came back warm, honest, and full of light. He wasn't afraid to say what he felt. He wasn't afraid to reach out. Then one evening my phone rang. His voice was quiet but steady. "Dad, can you come over? I just need someone to talk to." When I arrived, his apartment felt like him. Warm, creative, full of sketches taped to the walls, plants in mismatched mugs, soft music in the background. He smiled faintly. "I didn't need advice," he said. "I just needed company." We talked late into the night. Not about the past, but about everything that still mattered. Dreams, mistakes, fears, and what it means to start over. I listened. Really listened. And for the first time, I understood what my role was. Not to fix, not to lead, but to simply be there. To be a safe place again. By the time I left, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. A fragile, quiet kind of peace that comes from honesty, connection without guilt, love without confusion, understanding without judgment. For a moment, I remembered what it felt like to belong, but peace doesn't always last. The next morning, Clara confronted me. "I know where you were," she said, her voice calm but cold. "And I know who you were with." My stomach dropped. I tried to explain, but she cut me off. "You're not the same person I married," she said. And in that moment, I realized she was right. I wasn't. Maybe I never had been. I stood there in silence, the morning light stretching across the floor, and felt the full weight of truth settle over me. Relationships are fragile. Choices matter, and sometimes caring deeply still isn't enough to fix what's already broken. When I walked back into Leo's apartment, he stirred, rubbing his eyes. "Hey," he mumbled softly. "You okay?" I sat beside him, my heart pounding. Clara had found out. He sat up quickly. "How?" "I left my laptop open," I said quietly. "She saw the messages." His face paled. "What did she say?" I hesitated, the words heavy on my tongue. "She knows." "Everything," he exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry." I looked at him then. Really looked. Beneath his calm, I could see the guilt, the fear, and the quiet sadness he tried to hide. "I should go," I said finally. "No," he said quickly, reaching out instinctively before pulling his hand back. "Not like this. Don't just disappear again. Don't make this another silence we bury." "I have to talk to her," I replied. He nodded, his voice low. "Okay, but promise me you won't pretend this didn't matter. That we didn't reconnect." "I won't," I whispered. Back home, the air felt colder. Clara sat at the kitchen table, a mug of untouched coffee in her hands. Her eyes were tired, red-rimmed, but dry. "Sit," she said. I obeyed. "You want to explain yourself?" I swallowed hard. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "That doesn't matter," she said sharply. "You let it happen. It's complicated," I whispered. "Oh, do explain the complications," she said bitterly. "We've both been lonely for a long time." I fell silent. She folded her arms tightly. "Do you care about him?" The question hit like a blow. "I care deeply," I said finally. "More than I realized." She didn't answer, just stared out the window. That night, I stayed in a hotel. Rain streaked down the glass, blurring the city lights outside. My phone buzzed. "Leo, you okay?" "Me? Not really. But I'm facing it." "Leo, proud of you." "Me, I'm scared. But I care. That has to mean something." The next few days were chaos. Clara's silence. Calls from her lawyer. Curious looks from people at work. Word had spread somehow. Through it all, I kept seeing Leo, carefully, quietly. We talked, shared coffee, walked in the park, laughed about small things. It wasn't about escape anymore. It was about understanding, about rebuilding something human between us. The small gestures, a hand on a shoulder, a shared smile, passing him a brush while he painted, all spoke of trust. Not romance, connection. There were long, painful, beautiful silences between us, filled with questions neither of us could yet answer. One Sunday, sunlight streamed through his studio window as he painted. I stood behind him, watching the colors take shape, soft blues, muted golds, fragments of peace. Something inside me broke then. Not in regret, not in guilt, but in the quiet realization that connection, honest, imperfect, human connection, is what I'd been searching for all along. I walked over and gently helped him steady the canvas. And for the first time, it felt like we were both beginning again, not as strangers, but as two people finally learning how to see each other clearly. He smiled at me, and for a moment everything felt possible again. A relationship rebuilt, trust slowly restored, two hearts learning to be close again, safely, honestly. That night, neither of us slept, not because of tension or regret, but because there was so much to say. We talked for hours, sharing memories, laughter, and the quiet truths that had been buried for years. Every word, every look between us carried a kind of healing I hadn't felt in a very long time. In the days that followed, we began to talk seriously about what this new chapter meant, what we were, what we wanted, and how others might see it. You know, people won't understand, he said one evening as we walked through a quiet park. I don't care what they understand, I replied. I care that you make me feel seen. He smiled softly. I've always wanted to hear that. I placed a hand on his shoulder, looking him in the eye. You were never broken, I said quietly. You just needed someone who truly saw you. He nodded, a small, grateful smile forming. I feel seen now, he said. But the truth always changes things. He was right. Clara filed for divorce. My employer suggested I take a leave, discreetly, and whispers began to follow me everywhere. But even as my old life fell apart, I didn't stop spending time with him. Because in the middle of the wreckage, I had found something worth holding on to: connection, understanding, and honesty. Months passed. The world didn't explode. It just quietly reshaped itself. Clara stopped calling. The divorce moved forward with mechanical efficiency. I signed the papers, closed a 20-year chapter, and stepped into an uncertain but honest future. I moved into a small apartment just outside the city. Bare walls, basic furniture. The hum of traffic outside, but it felt like mine. The first person I invited over was Leo. He didn't say much when he arrived, just stood there, looked around, and smiled softly. This feels right, he said. I didn't need to ask what he meant. We began a quiet routine, slow, simple, meaningful. Mornings with shared coffee, afternoons spent discussing art or walking through galleries, evenings with classic films that always ended in long, thoughtful silences. He loved movies about people finding connection in unexpected places. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me instead of the screen. Why? I asked once, half smiling. Because you're real, he said. The world can be so sharp. But this, he gestured between us, this feels human. One afternoon, while we were walking through a small art gallery, we ran into some of my former colleagues. They froze when they saw us, two people standing quietly side by side, not hiding, not explaining. Leo's hand was near mine, close enough to see the truth, but not enough to invite misunderstanding. And in that small, fragile moment, I realized something simple but profound. Healing doesn't always come from forgetting the past. Sometimes it comes from finally being brave enough to face it. Jasper, one of them said politely, though his tone carried distance. Didn't know you were back in town. I never left, I replied calmly. His eyes shifted toward Leo. This is my son, I said simply. The silence that followed was sharp, heavy with judgment unspoken. They nodded stiffly and left without another word. Outside, Leo finally spoke. They know, he said quietly. I know, I replied. He hesitated. Do you regret being seen with me? I stopped walking, turned to face him. Never. He looked at me uncertain, searching my eyes for truth. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You're not a mistake, I said softly. You're the part of my life that's real, the part that's honest. His eyes shimmered. I just hate that people see me differently than I am, he whispered. They don't know you, I said. But I do. A few nights later, everything came crashing down. We were sitting at my apartment eating takeout and laughing over old memories when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Clara standing there. She looked thinner, her face drawn tight. Beside her stood a man in a suit, serious, unreadable. I just want to talk, she said. Leo stepped into view. Clara's expression hardened immediately. I said talk, she snapped, not play house with him. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Clara, I said quietly, he's an adult now. He makes his own choices, she folded her arms. You were supposed to be a mentor, Jasper. A guide, not this. You're not stable. You're not safe. My chest tightened. Clara, you've already lost me, I said. Don't try to take him away, too. She shook her head, her voice sharp as glass. He's not yours anymore. Whatever he is now, you made him that. Then she turned and walked away. That night, I told Leo everything. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stood there, silent. She's right, he said finally. This is going to ruin you. It's already cost me everything, I admitted quietly. But not you. Never you. He looked down, his voice trembling. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. You're not, I said. You're the reason I finally stopped hiding. He met my eyes. If I have to choose between safety and truth, he whispered, I'll choose truth every time. That night, we didn't run from what we felt. We sat close, hands clasped, silent but connected. Two people choosing honesty over fear. No words, no secrets, just presence. The camera could have captured only that. The warmth, the humanity, the stillness between heartbeats. Because sometimes, love isn't about romance. It's about courage, the kind that makes you stand in the light, even when it costs you everything. You matter to me. A week later, Leo brought over a huge canvas, deep red strokes layered with grays and streaks of gold. What is it? I asked. Us, he said simply. Messy, honest, beautiful. I stared at it for a long moment. Then, without thinking, I leaned forward and kissed his forehead, not out of desire, but out of love. The kind of love that sees someone fully without judgment. But love, any kind of love, doesn't exist in silence. The whispers started soon after. Social media posts, gossip, anonymous messages. One night, Leo held my phone, deleting another cruel comment. I can't let this destroy you, he said. It already did, I replied quietly. But sometimes, destruction is how you build something better from the ashes. He looked at me for a long time. Then let's rebuild, he said softly. Let's make something new. The world didn't welcome us. It turned cold, judgmental, unforgiving, but we didn't run. We didn't hide. And we didn't apologize for caring deeply. We just lived. For the first time, I wasn't trying to fit into a version of life that felt false. I was building a new one made of honesty, art, and quiet courage. At night, we painted side by side. Sometimes he'd put on soft music, Mazzy Star, gentle acoustic songs that carried longing and hope in every note. The candlelight flickered across the walls, across our faces, and for once, everything felt still. Between those colors and melodies, we created something impossible to name. Trust, understanding, connection. One evening, I found him on the rooftop. The city lights shimmered below us, stretching endlessly into the night. He sat cross-legged on a blanket, a thermos of tea beside him. You okay? I asked, sitting down beside him. He didn't look at me right away. I've been thinking. Dangerous, I teased. A small smile crossed his face. Then he turned, eyes serious now. What if we stopped waiting for the world to give us permission? I frowned slightly. What do you mean? I mean, what if we stopped hiding, stopped apologizing? What if we just told the truth about who we are, what we believe, and what we stand for? I reached for his hand. I don't want to make things harder for you, I said quietly. He shook his head. The truth doesn't hurt, he said softly. The silence does. Then he handed me his phone. On the screen was a draft post, just a few words, simple and brave. I stopped following the rules the world gave me. I started following the ones my heart needed. I found someone who truly sees me, and I couldn't pretend it wasn't real. I looked at him. Are you sure? His eyes were steady. If we keep hiding, they win. I nodded and tapped post. The reaction was immediate. Some were cruel. Some laughed. Some demanded answers. But then something beautiful happened. Private messages arrived from strangers, men, women, couples, all saying the same thing. I thought I was alone. Your courage gave me permission to feel. I don't understand your story, but I respect it. Love saved me. Maybe it's saving you too. A month later, his art show opened. Not in a fancy gallery, but in a cozy converted warehouse, soft jazz spilling from speakers, raw wood glowing in the light. The space was full, friends, artists, and quiet onlookers who had followed the story online, all witnessing the honesty of his work and the journey that had brought him here. The centerpiece was a towering canvas titled Inheritance. It showed two figures, one older, one younger, rendered in swirling layers of charcoal and deep red, gold halos hovering above both heads. Not father and son, not lovers, just two souls reaching across a lifetime of longing and understanding. At the bottom, in Leo's delicate handwriting, was a quote. "I found connection in the place I least expected, inside the man who gave me life and the life I never knew I needed." I stared at it, then turned to Leo. He was watching me, not the crowd. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. "I'm proud of us," he replied. That night, we celebrated quietly on the rooftop. Just the two of us, no noise, no crowds. The moonlight washed over us like a blessing. "I used to think I was broken," he said softly. "You're not broken," I murmured. "You're rare, unapologetic, alive." He smiled and touched my chest over my heart. "And you?" he asked. "I spent most of my life trying to fit someone else's version of me, husband, father, architect, and somewhere along the way, I forgot who I was. But now, I feel more like myself than ever." Under the stars that night, it wasn't about labels, expectations, or the world's judgment. It was about truth, presence, and the bond we shared. Life moved forward. I took up freelance writing, focusing on essays about emotional honesty, art, and finding connection where you least expect it. One piece went viral. Leo continued painting, and his work began appearing in galleries in LA and Berlin. We traveled, laughed, and embraced each day as it came. Some people never understood us, but we didn't need them. Every morning, I woke up beside him, his hair messy, his skin warm, his quiet presence steady and real. I realized then why I had walked away from the life I once knew. Not to escape, but to finally arrive. Connection, love, and authenticity aren't always where the world expects them to be. Sometimes they're quiet. Sometimes they're complicated. But when they're real, you don't walk away. You step into them, even when it defies expectation. Because in the end, truth and love are the only things truly worth choosing.